fantastic. So this is running through your presentation. So the best way to do this, Martin, is if you can run through the presentation first, I'll make some notes and then we'll do some feedback around how we can structure it a bit more strongly. How does that sound?
Sounds good, Jacqueline. Sounds good.
Amazing.
So, Jacqueline, I would like to put a case to you for coaching for surgeons is best practice. I believe that we are not doing this at the moment, and this is something we need to aspire to do. Let's see how I go forward with my presentation. Let's try that one. There we go. So coaching means many things to many people. And we'll sort of discuss that because I don't think surgeons understand what coaching is. Here is a picture of coaching. I would suggest this is quite successful coaching, as after 37 years, the gentleman in the middle here was able to develop a culture at this football club that it took 7 years to actually develop this culture, but he was able to achieve success by adopting a coaching approach. Interestingly, he was about to be sacked at the end of the previous season because of not achieving results that people wanted. But there was vision from the CEO and the first female president of our club that the way forward was to send him and the captain, who's also pictured here, to Harvard to learn about coaching as a culture building practice, and the proof is in the pudding. Many surgeons, many people would have experienced coaching in sporting activities that they had as a child. I would suggest that coaching is more than that, but this is probably a starting point for some people to help them understand what the process is about. I've worked with many organizations over the years. One of them is called the AO Foundation. This is a Swiss-based German group, not-for-profit, that teach orthopedic surgeons how to fix fractures. They have a very good culture of learning. And in 2012, they flew myself and a number of other similar surgeons who are interested in surgical education to Zurich. And we did a week of training on how to be better educators. And we were sent back in the plane as our homework to read an article by Udo Gavundi, who is a general surgeon in New York, who wrote an amazing article in 2011 about the fact that he believes all surgeons should have a coach. This organisation does have a culture of learning, of faculty development. This is a picture of that, which we don't have time to elucidate, but it just illustrates that this organisation gets it. Yeah. This is the article I was referring to that Gavundi wrote, and I will discuss some of the key points that he brings out and are relevant for the topic we're talking about today. He says that picture Rafael Nadal, arguably the best ever tennis player in the world. Rafael Nadal, although he's the best in the world, has a coach. Well, actually, he probably has more than one coach. He probably has a serving coach and a backhand coach and a psychological coach to get him in the right frame to win all of the Grand Slams that he's had. Gavundi has also done a TED Talk around this, and he, in the TED Talk and the article, described the best violinist in the New York Symphony Orchestra. He said that this person went to the best conservatorium in the United States to become the best violinist, but realized that he couldn't do that without a coach. Interestingly, it was his wife that actually became the coach. They were both aspiring to be the best violinist in the world, and they tossed a coin. He lost, she won. She became his coach and made him the best violinist in the world. I think that's very inspiring. So Gavundi then says, well, we as surgeons, probably if we aspire to be the best surgeons in the world or best surgeon that we can be, need a coach. And he goes on to describe how he found a coach. It happened to be his recently retired person who taught him how to do surgery. And he got this person to come back, observe him in his teaching, in his role as a coach, and how that person was able to make him the best surgeon he could be. This, however, is not coaching, Jacqueline. We don't shout at our people anymore. It might have been the way in the past, but this is not effective coaching. So I would suggest that although when I was a surgical trainee learning how to do my job, I had this sort of coaching to be the best surgeon I could be, suggest that fortunately I was able to let that water run off my back and realize there was a better way than this for teaching surgeons to be the best coach. This picture, I think, would suggest a better way of coaching. This is Ash Barty, our best ever female tennis player, I would suggest. And she rose to the height she did by getting a team of coaches around her. And she's hugging here and got to present the cup to Trent Cotchin for our premiership in Brisbane in 2019. I think this is a beautiful picture illustrating what Ash Barty was able to achieve by changing the culture around her to become the best player she could be. So coaching, I would suggest you is changing your mindset from a fixed mindset that I would suggest most of my surgical colleagues have. They're already the best. Just ask them. They'll tell you how good they are. Whereas I would suggest there is a better way. And if we adopt a growth mindset that we can always aspire to be better than we are, but we probably need to do that with the help of a coach, this is a better way to go ahead. And this is a nice little picture about how many of my fixed mindset coaches might be thinking about something on the left and the coach on the right helping them maybe unravel it to actually get their aspiration of where they want to be. This slide just says that coaching is not teaching, mentoring, consulting, that again, I think some of my fixed mindset coaching colleagues would perceive coaching to be. So it's a bit of education here to actually help them understand what a coach can provide. And they're not teachers, they're not mentors. Both those roles have a role in helping you in your surgical career, but a coach actually helps to hold you accountable, helps you maybe use some of these other people to improve you as a coach. So it's about asking and it's about solution focused. Unfortunately, we as coaches, as surgeons, are very problem-based and we're looking for a solution for a problem. We're very good at that. But to improve us as overall coaches, we probably need to be more solution focused and asking questions, which is what coaches do, and not telling patients as we do what their problem is and this is how to fix it. And we might even be able to get better at that in communicating with our patients if we adopt this approach. So we've got to go from our comfort zone of being the best coach, just ask us, to actually seeing that there is a better way. That might involve going through the fear zone. No, we don't like things that make us uncomfortable, leading to a learning zone, to the growth zone, and being a better person, a better surgeon. And this involves someone who has the skills to help us through this difficult time, which I would suggest as a coach. Lots of things we can read about. I've read a number of these books. I think to ask my colleagues to read these books would be futile. And we need to sort of help them through this thing. And one of the best books that I wrote, and if I read, and if I was going to give a book to one of my surgeons about coaching, this is probably one. John Whitmore has written a lovely, simple book that helps to understand what this process is. He talks about the GROW model, one framework that we use in coaching, but there are many others. What I liked in the book was this simple equation, and surgeons are simple people, so we've got to keep it simple for them. Confuse them with too much detail, they're not going to get it. So they talk about performance equals your potential minus the impediments. And coaching really works on those impediments. We've got to try and minimize those to maximize our performance, and that maximize our potential, to maximize our performance. And this is what it's all about. And Whitmore acknowledges Tim Galway as giving him this idea. He worked with Tim early in the time. And again, I think surgeons would get the inner game of tennis. So another book I might give one of the surgeons, if they want to read about it, is The Inner Game of Tennis, where Galway sort of talks about this simple equation and sort of broadens it to help performance focused surgeons to get this coaching process. Now, coaching is much more than performance coaching, but you've got to start somewhere. You've got to get them in, and I think they would get the performance coaching bit. And Galway talks about self one and self two. We don't have time to go into that in this conversation now, but we could expand it later. This is something that we need to help the surgeons understand. So during COVID, I was made unemployed by our fearless leader in Victoria. He didn't think orthopaedic surgery was important, so I was unemployed for 2.5 years. But I took the growth mindset approach that I was now time rich rather than time poor, and went and sort of saw what coaching training is there in the world. There's very little. This is a group out of Wisconsin who probably have done the most in this field. And I went and did their 4-hour online course, and it was interesting, and I got a little bit out of it, and that was good. Read a lot of books because I was time rich. And again, another book that I might give to my coaching surgical colleagues might be Michael Bungay Stanier, who keeps coaching simple. But I also went out and sought a coach. This was the gentleman who I did my knee fellowship in the day, and I got John to come and actually do what Gavundi had said, and got a lot out of him coming in. I don't think John really understood what coaching was, but he certainly was able to come and give me some feedback. And if maybe we'd given John a little bit more coaching practice and skills, that may have even been more rewarding than it already was. It was good. It was a good start, and that sort of thing. Now, I'm going to be critical here, Jacqueline. I believe that continuing professional development, that the College of Surgeons and APRA and all these regulatory bodies are pumping on about is a tick box exercise. And I would suggest we need to change that culture to actually being true continuing professional development, and that, I believe, is coaching. We may use this tool, and the coach might hold us accountable to set some goals around this tick box exercise. But what we do at the moment with the College of Surgeons or the AOA, I'm also a member of the Australian Orthopaedic Association, their CPD is simply tick box and not good enough, not fit for purpose. So, as I said, I did a little bit of training with the Academy of Surgical Coaching out of Wisconsin, got the idea about how we could progress teaching surgeons about this very important skill of coaching, and see if we could get some of them to adopt this way of thinking to make them better. This is Dr. Greenberg, who was actually a fellow of Adel Gavundi. And in America, all of the surgeons move on after they've done the fellowship. She went to Wisconsin. She's now moved on to Atlanta, Georgia, and is trying to spread the word about how good coaching is. And this is the Wisconsin Surgical Coaching Program that I would say hold up as probably the best we've got at the moment. It's a good start. As I say, they talk about the mindset, they talk about coaching behaviours, etc., and it's a good start. So I've done their program. You see me, if we look on this picture, top left, 2 from the side there, I am up there as one of the people they've trained and interested in coaching. It's interesting that so far, although I have volunteered to do some coaching in their program, I haven't had anyone approach me for that. So I think the North Americans might get it a bit. The Australians don't get it at all. We need to do something about that, Jacqueline. Mm-hmm. And this is how we're going to go forward to sort of introduce surgical coaching and progress through with that. Mm-hmm. Surgeons all like evidence. The only people really writing about this and actually publishing have been the group out of Wisconsin. So they do have some limited results of the effect of the coaching that they've done. So I think we need to go. Surgeons, doctors are going to come back at you and say, where's the evidence? We practice evidence-based medicine. There's a little bit of evidence here that I can provide them, but it's still limited. Maybe I need to do a PhD on it to sort of help with the evidence production. I think I might stop there because I think that's given you enough of a flavour of where we're up to. There's a few more slides there, but I think that that's a good introduction to my vision and what I'd like to do, and I will value your feedback.
So the first question I have, because I've written quite a few notes, and the first question that I do have to start with is, what's the outcome of this? Do you want people to adopt surgical coaching as a culture? Do you want people to involve you in that? Or do you want people to go to organizations that are already established to provide the surgical coaching? So what is the actual outcome of when you speak to people?
So during COVID, I sought out a few early adopters and spoke to the Wisconsin people and got them to run a specific Australia course. And we had about 20 people involved in that. Trained them up, but as far as I know, no one has taken that beyond and used it in coaching in Australia yet.
Yeah.
With my professor of surgical education, so I'm up to my third master's now. The other thing I did when I was time rich over COVID was I started the Master of Coaching Psychology out of the University of Sydney. And I'm 5 subjects into an 8-subject master's to upskill myself so I can actually, go with credibility to teach this thing. But Deborah and Estelle, my professor of surgical education, which was my second master's, and I have set up a 6-week fundamentals of clinical coaching at Monash University. And we are just finishing up our second pilot run of that. We did one at the end of last year. We've just about finished the second one now. And interestingly, we've had 8 and 8, I think, students in each. Half of those have been emergency physicians. The majority of the others have been ED physicians or anaesthetists. We've had 1 nurse, we've had 1 physiotherapist, but guess what? Not 1 surgeon come to do that coaching, learning how to be a coach. So I need to work out how I can get out there, get a few more early adopters from the surgeons, come in and learn this skill, start practicing it, and then get some FOMO happening to, surgeons are very much into FOMO. They are fearful of missing out. And if we can sort of get something going that everyone's talking about and saying, wow, this is amazing, it's changed my career, I'm a much better surgeon now than I ever was, we'll have people flocking, is my business model.
So what I love about this is the intentionality is really strong. You want to create a real shift in culture, and you want actually people to come in and actually participate in being the change, not necessarily working with you necessarily, but actually coming in and availing themselves of these resources to create this shift. So with presentations, and I've actually done this successfully with people speaking to dentists and people speaking to medical professionals. So what you're going to present, and some of it was for briefing me and understand that, but we've actually got to open differently. So you've got 3 really distinct stories as you come in. One is around the coach that you use. Is that the Hawthorn team?
That was the Tigers. That was Richmond.
Tigers.
Okay, Tigers.
So,
yep. My team. So I'm sort of a little bit passionate about it. You look at my walls, you can see it all there.
I was trying to see it, but it was like, it was too small when I was looking on the thing. There we go. So what's really important with when we open is we have to, before we get to what's in it and what I'm going to talk to you about, we have to engage people, and even surgeons engage this way. So, I once had somebody presenting to a conference of 5,500 dentists, and she said they're never going to go for story. And she got a first ever standing ovation when we actually went this story methodology. So the way that a true structure is done for a presentation, when we need to motivate people to a different outcome, if you think about a loop like this, right? So we come in with story, then at a certain point, we go very clearly what we're going to be sharing with them, what's in it for them. And then we go into the engine room, which is all the technical stuff you were talking about. And then as we come out, it's almost like we're calling them to their future, right? So on that basis, you've got 3 really strong stories. So I really love that visual you have of the coach for the Tigers, because that is just, you can just see, right? What I'd like you to do is to think about framing that story. So instead of like, here's a picture of coaching, he was 37 years, that I almost want you to do a before and after, right? So the story shapes as, and I'd name him. I'd say, here's an incredible coach. He is, and he was with the Tigers, X to Z. For the first 6 years of that, he wasn't delivering, he wasn't achieving the culture he wanted, and he was about to be fired, and then do the decision to go to Harvard, and then talk about the difference in that year afterwards, right? So there's a contrast frame. Then the next story, you actually talk about AO Foundation, and that introduce you to Gawanda. What I would do is, you've got the coach story, and then you actually mention the most surgeons know of coaching from being a child and having sport, right? So what I would actually do is I'd push that right at the front and open with, I'm going to actually talk about something that's a little bit foreign to most people in the surgical fields. And that is that we actually need to adopt a culture of coaching. And for all of you who are unsure about this, raise your hand if you played team sports as a kid, right?
Yep.
And straight away breaking their normal and say, okay, most of the room played team sports as a kid. Keep your hands up if that team sport included a coach. Now, that might have been your dad or your best mate's dad, but who had a coach as part of that team sports as a kid? Okay, so all of us actually understand that we need coaches for performance. And then you go into the picture of the guy from the Tigers. Then your next story from that is actually about the Rafael Nadal, right, and Ash Barty, right?
Yep.
So it's positioning those two. And it's also too, like I would say, instead of saying, I'm assuming he have, like on Rafael Nadal's team, he has this coach, that coach, this coach, that coach, like rattle it off and talk about the team that it takes, right? And then flick to Ash, but with Ash also too, like, go into the fact that the whole of the country recognizes that her mindset coach made the difference, and talk about the difference that he made for Ash and the acceleration of her performance. Then go into, you kind of split the story with Gawanda into two, with Raphael and Ash in the middle, bring those all into one, and really bring it home with what you discovered about Gawanda, his TED talk, his story of finding his coach. So it's all in one and I can follow it easily. And that gives you your three big stories coming in, which is really important. And at that point, you then say, so what I want to share with you, or what I want you to understand by the time we finish our time together, is just how imperative coaching is, even to surgeons. If it's good enough for every other high performance occupation and sport in the world, then it's good enough for us, right? So something along those lines. So what I want to share with you, and then why it matters for them. So it's kind of what I'm going to share with you. And then the second part of that you structure is because when you have X, then you get Y, right? And that bit all together, the what, when you have X, then you get Y, the what, when, why, is no more than about 2 to 3 minutes. It's sharp and punchy. So, your surgeons and anyone who's technical brained, it's like, yeah, okay, I understand now through story and what you're talking about. You've got my attention. I feel like I can trust you. And then, but they're sitting there and going, tell me what I'm going to get. Be specific. That's why, and you put that there, right? Then where you go into this, the photo of the really bad coach, and you talk about that's kind of what you grew up with as a young surgeon. I want you to then go, let's first define what bad coaching is, right? Use and reshape some of the content into that, and then flick to what good coaching is, right? And then bring those two together with that green diagram that you've got of what coaching is and is not. And then you can go more powerfully into those diagrams that you've got, those slides with the different diagrams.
Yep.
As you come out of that part, then you also talk about, we might even be able to do this. We might even be able to do that. I want you to own it, right? So instead of what we might be able to do, and even though you don't have research specific to surgeons, there is so much high performance coaching research in the world that proves that this works, right? So what I want you to go, instead of saying we might even be able to, and there's a different, you say it 3 or 4 different times throughout the second half of what you just ran me through, is bring it all together again. And so after you've said what coaching is, what coaching isn't, and then those diagrams, say, let's talk about what's possible when we adopt a coaching mindset and a coaching culture across the surgical field. And then talk about, we will be able to do this. We will notice this. We will see, and pull those bits of research out of that organization in Wisconsin to back it up. So don't actually walk us through the research, actually pull it into, this is what we will notice, and really own the difference that it makes, right?
Yep.
Then with the slide that you've got all the little books, just get rid of that. It's a distraction.
Yep.
Right? And go straight to the Sir Whitman book, right? And straight into the formula, right? And then tighten that up. So, the Sir Whitman book, this is the one that actually was pivotal in my time-rich formula. So actually, let me back that up, because I was writing notes and I realized you had another section. So if we go into the next column, if you like, we get rid of the books, and you talk about, go straight into time-rich before you talk about Sir Whitman. And you say, the first was, I did a 4-hour masterclass with this organization in Wisconsin, and talk about what you got out of that. So not just that you did it, but what you got out of it and what it changed for you. Then the second thing I did was I went really deep into books. Then you go into the Sir Whitman book, then you go into the Galway stuff, and then you talk about the Michael Bungay book, right? So instead of saying things about what you might get out of it, it's like, this is what I got out of it. So you're sharing that insight, right? Not just showing the things. And then the third thing you did was I found my first surgical coach, which was when you revisited that person you've worked with before. Then when you get to then your next silo, if you like, is about the PD being check the box, right? So how I want you to frame that is, as you open that particular silo, it's going to be, but we've got a really big problem. You know, we've got our greatest challenge to being able to flourish as surgeons, as high performers in every industry around the world can, is that our peak and regulatory bodies, including APRA, orthopedic surgeons, whatever, like rattle them off, all of them are tying our CPD points to transactional tick the box activities, which are not helping us to flourish and to continually get better as surgeons, right? So then you frame, and so from that, then you can actually talk about why this matters. You can kind of contrast the tick the box, but if we added the coaching, you can add in the solution of coaches may well use the frameworks that these associate peak bodies have and regulatory authorities have, but we actually are going to do it in a different way, in a way that actually makes a difference for us, right? And so that is actually what I would suggest from what you've shown me. So when we do what we call a subject matter expert presentation, and my apologies because I don't have the iPad live. Oh, sorry. So what we do is so if we come in from here, from the left-hand side, this is how we come in. So remember, I just chunked you into 3 stories. So
Yep.
And then here is the what, when, then. So the what sits above the line when, then. So that's where we bring it in tight. And then we have 3 key columns, which is what I've just shaped for you in your content. So when I said those 3 key silos, so we
Yep.
have 3 key silos and we shape everything into that so it makes sense. And then we come out fairly quickly with almost like a challenge question call to arms. So we almost reflect back to these stories coming in. So for example, it would be, you know, coming back into speaking about Gawanda and what he discovered. You know, we can actually all be a Gawanda in our own surgeries, our own spaces, our own places of work. We can be our own Gawanda. We can make this work for us. We can perform at his levels. Then the next bit might be, you know, and we are able to bring in, you know, the same skills as Rafael Nadal. We have our mentors in our professional education, but if we bring in the coaches like Ash did to change our mindset and to thrive in this environment, think of how much better we can be. And then the last bit is, because at the end of the day, every one of us want to be surrounded by a team like, what's his name, the guy's name from the Tigers, like something like that.
Damien Hardwick.
Thank you. But that's how, and that's not necessarily how you'll touch back in, because you'll understand it once you reshape all of it. But coming out is only a few minutes, and it literally is using the stories you've used on the way in to, on the way out, position why this really matters, to create that call to arms. The other thing that it does by doing that is we actually close the loops from where we open to where we go out. And that means that people neurologically and psychologically feel like you've actually kind of like, you know, the Tiffany jewelry box, and it comes in a green box and the bow is done up on it. It's kind of like we do the bows up for people. We give them the complete box with the bow. So it just closes the neurological loops for them. And that's why we use that structure. Does that make sense?
Good. Yes, it does. Yep.
It does. Yeah. And so you will see a dramatic difference in just doing that part of it. Right.
Now just clarify for me the silos. Below your line, the 3, 2, 1. Just help me again there.
So with yours, we had talking about the what coaching is not and what coaching is. Then the second one we were bringing back to, you were time rich, which is we talk about the 4 hours online with the course and what it introduced you to. the key books that we're going to talk about and deconstruct, and finding the first coach. And then the third one is the challenge that we have is tick the box PD through our regulatory and peak body associations.
Got it. There's enough stories to start. There's enough silos to talk about. Padding it out anymore is detrimental.
Yeah, so I would actually bring it into those and then just get every bit of it quite sharp and easy to follow. So one of the reasons why we use structure and framework, and I guess being a surgeon, it's not something I need to sort of really press home, but one of the reasons being is we want people to follow along and want them to take action at the end or think about something a bit differently. We have to give them a way that they can easily follow, because they'll hear you, whether or not you've got slides, whether or not you're actually presenting in person, they hear what you're saying. They've got to be able to follow and have hooks, right? Which is why, for example, at the end, instead of rattling off all the stuff around the CPD, we actually open with, there is a challenge we've got though, and we need to talk about it, right? Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, that was the challenge, right? So you're giving people things that they can auditorily hook into.
The call to arms I see is, hopefully they've processed all of this. I want some of this. It's part of the call to arms to say, and we have developed a 6-week, and I'll describe briefly how the 6-week goes. It's divided up into 3 blocks. So we have 2 weeks of content online, so anyone in Australia can do it. 1 week study week for the busy clinicians to catch up with any of the content they might not have done or consolidate. 2 weeks of content, and then 2 weeks study break, because they may have got even more behind, need to catch up. But in that second 2 weeks of study break, they've got enough content to start practicing some coaching themselves. So we break them up into triumvirates and they start practicing that. Then 2 more weeks of content, and then 1 week to finish up their assessment. One of their assessments is to actually do a 30-minute video capture of them practicing these skills. And the last assessment is actually reflecting on that.
Yeah.
So 4 assessments. The first assessment is just being involved with the online program. And the second assessment is doing a content around a micro skill or something like that, that we're teaching them about. So it's 6 weeks packed into 10. So it's right for busy clinicians, as I say, hopefully busy surgeons, but we've got other clinicians who've bought in already. So that's what I think I am able to offer, to say this is how you could do it.
So one of the things I'm very adamant about is we don't try and pitch whole programs when we're speaking, right? Because what we want to do is we want them to buy in, and we want them to find you and say, what can I do?
Good.
Right? So what I would do is when you're coming out, where I described that earlier, of like you link it back to the Gawanda story, you link it back to the Raphael and Ash stuff, and you link it back to the Richmond Tigers, is what I want you to do is you frame it. You'd say, what we've discovered is all of us need to build muscle or build skills in this area. So, over a period of time, you need to do what Gawanda did. Then you need to do what this person did. And then you need to do, because you can link it back to, for example, the Tigers, they went off to Harvard and they learned the things, but they also implemented. So whatever you do next, once you realize that this is really important, whatever you do next, it has to have a combination of learning and reflection and implementation, so that you can build the skills that are going to be necessary to elevate the coaching outcomes that are going to improve your practice as a surgeon, right? So that's how you position it. So then they go, oh, I need to know more about that, but you don't try and sell it from the platform, so to speak.
Understood.
Yeah.
Very
amazing.
helpful.
Any other quick questions?
I think that's really good.
Incredible. I'm going to hit stop right now.